whatever you need to do to feel empowered, do what you need to do. But we were doing it that way before we made death and dying a business. We overcomplicate everything, and death is not that complicated. There's a lot of crossover between what a doula does and what a midwife does for end of life. But the way I see it, a midwife is doing kind of anything from spiritual counseling to funeral arrangements to conducting a home funeral, everything in between, starting from when the person is deciding to work with them at end of life through the very, very, very end. And that doesn't mean that a doula can't do those things. I do have those offerings within my practice, but it's not really something I do the most of. So what I usually do is I'm with a client, usually at the point where the family has a diagnosis for their loved one. They know they want to take their loved one home. They know that they're going to need some kind of help, but they don't really know how to navigate through it. And so I call myself a doula, but I really position myself more like a coach, because through my learnings over the years, it's, the person that's dying knows how to die. Really what I do in my practice the most is I normalize the process for the people that are surrounding this person. And so it is a lot of coaching and normalizing. So you can call me a death coach, you can call me a death doula, you can call me an end of life care support. But I don't really identify with midwife, just because I do have some of the same offerings, but I'm not usually doing funeral arrangements and conducting funerals. I have quite a few doulas in my circle, and everybody does their practice a little bit differently. I need hospice to be on board, and sometimes people contact me and they're not on hospice yet, which is fine. I'll help them get enrolled, but hospice provides, the medical supplies, the medication, they have the nurse visits, the bath aid. I am really there to absorb everything that a family member would potentially feel the need to do. So I can run errands, I can answer calls, I can, schedule appointments. There's so many different things that a doula can do, but the most important thing that I bring is time. And so I really normalize this process so that the family members can be present, which means you're going to sit at the bedside and you're going to be who you've always been with your person. So if this is your mom, then having the doula allows you to continue your daughter or your son role, rather than now I'm the daughter, the son, and the caregiver. So there's a lot of task absorbing, and what hospice does is allow me to have that time and space to do those things. If I was playing both roles, which is impossible to do anyway, I wouldn't be able to offer what I offer to families. I support people with medical aid and dying. And sometimes all people want from me is to have a conversation on the phone, to ask questions that they don't feel they can ask, in their community or their doctor. I get a lot of phone calls from out of state, because in Washington, we're a right to die state. We're very progressive. And so there's a lot of support available, but there's a lot of states that don't have the offerings that we do. And so sometimes that's all I'm doing, is answering questions and giving people honest information. I do mentoring for doulas that have newly graduated and they want to start their business, or they want to start their practice and they don't know where to begin. And that's the one thing I say constantly is, in the beginning, I felt like I had to say yes to everything. I felt like I needed to learn everything, know everything, and specialize in everything. But that's not possible. And so what I've learned over the years is there are things that I do very, very well. And there are things that I don't want to say I don't enjoy as much as others, but I will say that just because I'll use paperwork as an example. And where I'm at now in my practice is I really do believe in the coaching strategy, because a lot of times people do want to support their loved one at home. They have the ability to do it. They just don't know how to navigate through it. And so sometimes I'm just working with somebody remotely giving them personal empowerment and practical tips so that they can be their best self at the bedside and support the one they love at home, with maybe not having a doula there. Maybe they just have the support. So, everybody has different needs, and I go into every situation with a beginner's mindset. I never bring any opinions or prior knowledge of how I did things, because every family dynamic is unique. So I have to be in that energy. I have to understand what's important to them. And then I can make recommendations on how I can best support them. It looks different for every single family. You've heard it so many times, but when someone's going to have a baby, we do all this planning and all this celebrating and all this, preparing, like we have baby shower and we get all these things ready. And the end of life is just the completion of that cycle, but we are just very hands off. No, nope, 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 until we're backed into this corner, and then emotions are high. And in order to get off that hamster wheel, we have to normalize it, just in the same way that we, celebrate and talk about and prepare for the baby to come. We should honor, celebrate, and talk about the completion of that cycle, which is the end of your life. My dad died on a Saturday. My mom died 6 Saturdays later. And then when that happened, it was crickets. Hospice left. I was in this really quiet house. Like, all this commotion had been going on for all these, 6 weeks. And then it's crickets. And you don't know where to turn or who to ask or what you need for support. And you've got people coming out of the woodwork wanting to support you, but you don't even know what to ask for. And so if we can have these conversations in advance and take the fear out of it, that cycle will stop. And then it will be a normalized, topic, like it should be. People want permission to talk about death. It's so true. I can't tell you, I've had a handful of phone calls that are simply this: I don't want to fight anymore. I don't want any more chemo. I don't know how to tell my family that I just want to die. I need to say it. Sometimes that's all I'm doing as a doula, is allowing someone permission to say what they really want to say, which is, I don't want to fight anymore. I just want to die. I had a client that was the extent of the work that I did with her. Is we had a phone conversation, and she was pretty young, for someone who was terminal, and she felt like she needed to fight and fight and fight and fight. And she was doing all of this horrible chemo that was making her miserably sick. She didn't want to do it anymore, but she didn't know how to tell her husband, because she didn't want to hurt his feelings. Well, so we had a conversation, and the next day I got a text from the husband saying that she died that night, and thanked me for just allowing her to say what she wanted to say. So you're right. People want to talk about it. They want permission to say what they're feeling, but we have just this fear that has been downloaded generation after generation. So we don't feel that it's okay to say what we really want to say. And once you provide that space, the floodgates open. They want to talk. People want to talk. There's a movement happening. There are conversations happening, and that's how it starts. There was a time that doctors would not allow a non-medical person in the birthing room. And now, it's not every hospital, but a lot of hospitals have doulas on site, ready to support the doctors and the birthing mother and the family. So we are normalizing it. And I think that the end of life movement is following suit. Making emotionally charged decisions when we're in this place where, emotions are high, and we haven't had conversations to really know how we want to navigate this in advance. So here we are. This is where the fear cycle, gains momentum, because we don't talk about what we fear, and we fear what we don't talk about. So it just continuously, has this hamster wheel effect until then it's, here we are, we want to honor our loved one. And so now we feel like we need to go into debt and we need to create this big ceremony and we need to show this person how much we loved them with this extravagant end of life celebration, when really I think most people would want to feel that experience while they're still here. And so, navigating through that means having those conversations in advance, knowing what's important to your loved ones. Until we start getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, that's the only way we're going to change the narrative, is if we start having these conversations. And if we wait until it's comfortable, it's never going to happen. We just have to do it. And that grateful death intention I was talking about, that was born from all of the things I wish I would have known to ask my parents, questions that I would love to have answers to that I never will. If you had 10 minutes of doula training before taking your loved one home, the most important thing I can tell you is just be present. Just be present. We overcomplicate everything. And death is not that complicated. Whatever you need to do to feel empowered to do this, do what you need to do. But honestly, we were doing it that way for the longest time before we made death and dying a business. Our culture, we made the shift. And so we were birthed at home and we died at home and we supported our people that way for a long, long time. And so having the doula present means that you can be candid and honest and transparent. And those are the people that ask me, the most questions. It's back to that permission. People want permission to talk about death, and they want permission to support their loved ones at home, and they want to understand what that looks like. And they might not be able to ask their church community about it, but they're going to find doulas and coaches and people that are working in end of life to give them that information. And don't you think that is where the fear component comes in? Because we really aren't afraid to die. We're afraid to suffer, and we're afraid of the unknown. So if we can tell you exactly what's going to happen, well, then it's like, okay, well, then I can prepare for that and I won't be so fearful. Well, I mean, there's no such thing. There's no checklist. It is the ultimate unknown, and that we as humans just can't be settled with that. Like, we're too afraid of not having control. I coach people on how to die well, and they teach me how to live well, because you can't be to all the different bedsides that I've been to and all the different family dynamics that I've been steeped in and look at life through the same lens. My life has been transformed by death. I'm in the middle of writing a book right now, and it's really just kind of like the pocket manual for, quick little practical tips and tricks for you to be comfortable to support your loved one at home when they're dying, because that is really the movement. I think that's the backbone of this movement in general, is we're all trying to bring the human aspect back to the bedside. Nobody wants to go and die in a hospital under sterile lights and beeping sounds and their loud neighbor next to them. That's not at all what I want for my end of life experience. And no one that comes into my awareness wants that either. And so we have to talk about it before it's time to make those decisions. And that's the way to do it, is to just take the awkwardness away and just start having the conversation, so it seems like a normal thing to talk about.